Lightning split the mountain in half. For one impossible heartbeat, the forest became brighter than daylight. Every snow-covered pine, every jagged cliff, every frozen stream stood naked beneath the white flash. Then darkness swallowed everything again, leaving only the roar of the storm. A battered wooden cabin trembled against the mountain wind. Inside, a young woman shoved her shoulder against the shaking door as another gust threatened to tear it from its hinges. "Just one more night," she whispered to the empty room. "Please." The cabin answered with silence. The fire had almost died. Only a handful of herbs hung drying from the rafters. One loaf of hard bread rested on the table. It was all she had left until spring. Another crack of thunder rolled across the valley. Then came a sound unlike anything the storm had made. A low, pain-filled growl. Heavy footsteps dragged across the porch. Slow, uneven, closer. Lyra Ashwood froze. Her father had once told her there were only two reasons a wolf would approach a human home during a blizzard. It was either starving or dying. The shadow beneath the door stopped moving. Silence. Then, a tremendous weight crashed against the wood. The entire cabin shook. Lyra grabbed the old iron poker beside the fireplace. Her breathing slowed. She counted 3 heartbeats, opened the latch, and pulled. The door burst inward under the weight of a massive white wolf. It collapsed across the threshold, snow swirling around its body. Blood spread across the frozen floorboards. The wolf was enormous, larger than any beast Lyra had ever imagined. Its thick white fur was stained crimson. One shoulder carried 3 deep claw wounds. A black hunting arrow protruded from its side. Its breathing came in shallow, painful bursts. But what truly stole her breath were its eyes, golden, sharp, not wild, not frightened. They looked into hers with calm authority, as though this wounded creature had spent its life giving commands no one dared refuse. Outside, the mountain answered with hundreds of distant howls. Not 1, not 10, hundreds. The wolf heard them. Its ears twitched, yet it made no effort to rise. It simply looked at Lyra, waiting, trusting, or perhaps choosing. Every instinct screamed at her to shut the door. If those howls belonged to its pack, they would arrive before dawn. If they belonged to enemies, they would arrive first. Either way, sheltering this creature could cost her life. She tightened her grip on the poker, then looked again at the blood soaking into her father's old floor. Her father had once said, "The measure of mercy is what you give when no one is watching." Slowly, she lowered the weapon. "You came to the wrong cabin," she whispered with a tired smile. "Because I can't let anything die at my doorstep." The wolf closed its eyes, as if it understood every word. The storm had ruled the mountains for 3 days. Snow drifted higher than the stone fences surrounding Lyra's tiny cabin, burying the herb garden she had spent all summer tending. The narrow trail leading toward the nearest border village had vanished beneath layers of fresh powder. Even the ancient pines bowed beneath the weight of ice. Winter always demanded something from everyone. From hunters, it demanded patience. From wolves, endurance. From healers, sacrifice. Lyra knelt beside the wounded animal without hesitation. The arrow worried her first. It wasn't crafted by ordinary hunters. The shaft was carved from black ash wood. Its feathers dyed a deep crimson. Strange silver runes circled the iron tip. She frowned. "I've never seen one like this." The wolf watched her silently. His breathing remained slow despite the pain. Most injured animals panicked when strangers approached. This one never snapped, never growled, never even flinched. Almost as if he had already decided she would not hurt him. Lyra warmed a small knife over the fire before carefully cutting away for around the wound. The blood had begun to clot. Not naturally. Something dark coated the arrowhead. Poison. She recognized the bitter scent immediately. Nightshade, crushed frost moss, and something else she couldn't identify. "Who wanted you dead?" she murmured. The wolf's ears twitched. Outside, another chorus of howls rolled across the mountains. Closer this time, the sound echoed through the trees before disappearing into the storm. Lyra glanced toward the window. Shapes moved between the snow-covered pines, too large to be deer, too silent to be bears. Wolves, watching, not approaching, just waiting. She forced herself back to work. "Don't move," The wolf obeyed. With one swift motion, she pulled the arrow free. Blood poured from the wound. The wolf's muscles tightened beneath its thick white fur, but it made no sound. Not even a whimper. Lyra pressed fresh cloth against the wound before grinding herbs inside a stone bowl. Juniper, silverleaf, mountain yarrow, her father's favorite mixture. It'll burn. She spread the green paste carefully. The wolf opened one eye. She almost laughed. You understood that, didn't you? His tail gave the faintest movement. Not quite a wag, more like quiet amusement. For the first time in weeks, Lyra smiled. Hours passed. The storm raged outside while warmth slowly returned to the cabin. Lyra fed the wolf melted snow mixed with medicinal roots. He drank carefully from the wooden bowl. Every movement carried remarkable discipline. Nothing about him felt ordinary. Even resting, he looked royal. As midnight approached, Lyra finally leaned back against the wall. Exhaustion settled over her aching shoulders. You'll make it, she whispered. I think you chose the right cabin after all. The wolf opened his eyes. For a long moment, neither of them looked away. No words existed between them. Only silence. Comfortable. Unexpected. Outside, a long, mournful howl broke the stillness. Then another. Then dozens more. The white wolf slowly struggled onto 3 legs. He limped toward the window. His ears stood alert. His entire posture changed. Not fearful. Protective. He positioned himself between Lyra and the door. She noticed. You think someone's coming? The wolf looked back at her. Another flash of lightning illuminated his scarred face. In that instant, he didn't resemble an animal. He looked like a king standing guard over the last safe place in the world. Then came a sound. Not wolves. Footsteps. Many of them. Crunching through deep snow. Human voices drifted faintly beyond the storm. Search every cabin. The Alpha must be nearby. If he's alive, finish it tonight. Lyra's blood ran cold. The wolf's golden eyes narrowed. Someone wasn't hunting a beast. They were hunting him. Without thinking, Lyra blew out every candle except the fire. Darkness swallowed the room. She helped the wolf lie behind stacks of dried firewood while throwing old blankets over his white fur. A loud knock slammed against the door. Open! She hesitated. Another strike. Harder. The hinges groaned. Lyra finally opened the door a crack. 3 armed men stood outside beneath heavy cloaks. Snow covered their shoulders. Each carried the same black arrows she'd removed from the wolf. We're tracking a dangerous beast, the tallest man said. Seen anything? Lyra kept her voice steady. Only snow. The man's eyes swept across the cabin. The fire. The herbs. The empty chair. The floor where she'd scrubbed away every trace of blood. You live alone. Since my father died. His expression softened for only a heartbeat before suspicion returned. If you find anything. He leaned closer. Don't be foolish enough to protect it. Their footsteps disappeared into the storm. Lyra shut the door slowly. Only then did she allow herself to breathe. Behind the stacked wood, the wolf emerged. Their eyes met again. This time, something had changed. Not gratitude. Respect. As though the creature understood the risk she had just taken for someone she didn't even know. The rest of the night passed in uneasy silence. The storm gradually weakened. The wind became gentler. The fire burned lower. Just before sunrise, Lyra finally drifted into a light sleep beside the hearth. A warm nose gently touched her hand. She opened her eyes. The wolf was standing. His wounds were still fresh, yet strength had returned to his posture. Golden sunlight spilled through the frost-covered window. The storm was over. The wolf walked toward the door, paused, looked back at Lyra, almost inviting her to follow. Curious, she unlatched the door. It creaked open. Cold morning air rushed inside. She stepped onto the porch and forgot how to breathe. The valley below had vanished. Every hill, every frozen stream, every clearing, covered, not in snow, but in wolves. Gray wolves, black wolves, silver wolves, massive alphas, young hunters, scarred elders. Thousands upon thousands stretched farther than the eye could see. None growled, none moved. The wounded white wolf stepped beside Lyra. He stood tall despite his injuries. The entire mountain fell silent. Then, as one, 10,000 wolves lowered their heads, not in surrender, not in fear, in absolute reverence. Lyra stared at the impossible sight, her heartbeat echoing in the still morning air. Only one question remained. Who had she welcomed into her home? Before Lyra could speak, the sea of wolves slowly parted down the center of the valley. Armored riders bearing the royal crest urged their horses forward, their faces pale with relief and disbelief. The oldest among them dropped to one knee before the wounded white wolf and spoke words that would shatter everything Lyra believed about the stranger she had saved. "Your Majesty, we've been searching for you." The old knight remained on one knee, his silver cloak half buried in the snow. His head stayed bowed. "So long as you still breathe, Silver Hollow still has its king." No one moved. Not the riders, not the wolves, not even the wind seemed willing to disturb the silence. Lyra looked from the kneeling soldiers to the wounded white wolf standing beside her. Her thoughts refused to connect. "King!" The wolf slowly stepped forward. His injured leg trembled beneath him, but his head remained high. The sea of wolves immediately lowered itself another inch, as though every heartbeat of the white wolf echoed inside them. Then something impossible happened. Soft silver light shimmered around the animal. It wasn't blinding magic or roaring power. It resembled moonlight reflecting across still water. The enormous wolf closed his eyes. His body shifted, bones rearranged with quiet, controlled movements. White fur dissolved into drifting strands of light. Within seconds, the creature that had slept beside Lyra's fireplace was gone. In his place stood a tall man wrapped in nothing but the old wool blanket she had tucked around him the night before. His dark hair fell to his shoulders. Fresh scars crossed his chest. The wound from the poisoned arrow still bled beneath layers of herbal paste. Golden eyes, the same eyes that had watched her through the long night, met hers once again. Only now, they belonged to a king. Lyra forgot to breathe. The kneeling soldiers lowered their heads even farther. "Long live Alpha King Kaelan Draven." The words rolled across the valley. Then thousands of wolves answered with one powerful howl that shook snow from the ancient pines. The mountain itself seemed to recognize its ruler. Kaelan did not acknowledge the cheering. Instead, he turned toward Lyra. For several quiet moments, neither of them spoke. Finally, his deep voice broke the silence. "You saved my life." It wasn't spoken dramatically. It sounded like a simple truth. Lyra blinked. I didn't know who you were. I know. You were just..." She hesitated before, smiling awkwardly. "A patient." Something almost invisible softened in Kaelan's expression. Not amusement. Respect. Most people bowed before him. She had cleaned poison from his wound. Most people called him Your Majesty. She had warned him his medicine would sting. Most people feared the Alpha King. She had simply refused to let him die. "I owe you a debt that cannot be measured," Kaelan said quietly. Lyra shook her head. "My father taught me that helping someone isn't a bargain." She looked toward the valley filled with wolves. "I don't expect anything." Kaelan studied her carefully. Almost everyone wanted something from a king. Land, power, gold, protection. She wanted nothing. That made her more difficult to understand than any enemy. Royal Physician Rowan pushed through the gathering crowd, carrying leather satchels filled with medicine. He stopped the instant he saw the herbs covering Kaelan's wound. His eyebrows rose. "Who treated this?" Kaelan answered without looking away from Lyra. "She did." Rowan knelt beside the king and carefully examined the injury. The physician's face slowly filled with disbelief. "The poison." He scraped away a small amount of herbal paste. "It's already breaking apart." He looked toward Lyra. "How?" "I recognized most of the ingredients." "Most?" "There was one plant I didn't know." Rowan frowned. "Neither did I." The physician carefully sniffed the poisoned blood before his face turned pale. "This poison was created specifically to kill an alpha." The surrounding soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. Kaelan's voice remained calm. "Which means whoever fired that arrow knew exactly who I was." Silence spread once again. No one needed to ask the next question. Someone inside the kingdom had planned this. Hours later, the royal procession descended from the mountains. Kaelan refused to ride inside the ornate carriage prepared for him. Instead, he chose a simple horse and insisted on remaining near Lyra's wagon. The decision confused nearly everyone. The Alpha King almost never altered royal protocol. Today, he ignored it completely. Lyra sat quietly among baskets, filled with herbs she had been persuaded to bring to the capital. She still wasn't convinced she belonged there. "I'll leave once you're fully recovered," she finally said. Kaelan glanced toward the snowy road ahead. "You assume I'm inviting you because I need a healer, aren't you?" "No." She waited. He didn't continue. Finally she sighed. "You really don't enjoy explaining yourself." A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. "I prefer watching before speaking." "I noticed." After several moments of comfortable silence, Kaelan finally said, "I've seen thousands of wolves." "I imagine so. I've never seen one choose a human the way they chose you." Lyra looked genuinely confused. "They didn't choose me." "They did. I only fed one injured wolf." Kaelan's eyes remained fixed on the road. "No." His voice grew quieter. "You earned their trust." By sunset the towers of Silver Hollow appeared beyond the snow-covered hills. The capital seemed carved directly into the mountains themselves. Massive stone walls wrapped around the city. Blue banners, bearing the silver wolf crest, fluttered above towering gates. Smoke curled from hundreds of chimneys. Children played beside frozen fountains. Market bells echoed across narrow streets. Yet beneath the peaceful appearance, something felt wrong. The smiles disappeared whenever armored patrols passed. Conversations stopped. People watched each other too carefully. Fear lingered beneath ordinary life. Lyra noticed. "So many guards." Kaelan answered without emotion. "There weren't this many before." "You expect another attack." "I expect betrayal." Inside the royal fortress, the atmosphere changed immediately. Nobles lined both sides of the great hall. Every person bowed deeply. Every face smiled. Yet very few eyes carried genuine relief. Kaelan noticed. So did Lyra. One elderly noble stepped forward. "We thank the moon goddess for returning our beloved king." Kaelan's gaze settled upon him. "You mourned me quickly." The noble's smile faltered. "I never doubted your majesty's survival." "You ordered preparations for my funeral yesterday." The hall became painfully quiet. No one dared speak. Lyra slowly realized something unsettling. The greatest danger wasn't outside these walls. It lived within them. That evening, Lyra wandered into the royal gardens to escape the overwhelming palace. The moon hung low above frozen ponds. Snow drifted silently from pine branches. She missed her cabin already. Life there had been lonely, but at least it had been honest. A rustle came from nearby bushes. She turned. A large gray wolf stepped into the moonlight. Its muzzle was covered in old scars. One ear had been torn nearly in half. The wolf walked straight toward her. Palace guards reached for their swords. "Stand back!" "The old guardian." But before anyone could move, the wolf sat calmly at Lyra's feet. Its tired amber eyes never left hers. Without thinking, Lyra crouched. "You've been fighting for a long time." She gently brushed snow from the old wolf's fur. The animal leaned into her hand. The guard stared. One whispered, "That's fun." Another swallowed hard. "He hasn't allowed anyone to touch him in 15 years. Finn closed his eyes peacefully beneath Lyra's hand. Across the garden, Kaelan had been watching in silence. His expression remained unreadable, but something inside him shifted. Not because Finn obeyed Lyra. Finn obeyed no one. He had served 3 generations of Alpha Kings. If the ancient wolf had chosen Lyra, then this was no coincidence. Later that night, Kaelan stood alone in the royal war chamber. Maps covered the stone table. Colored markers showed missing border patrols, burned villages, disappearing food caravans, broken alliances. Rowan entered quietly. "The poison has been identified." Kaelan looked up. "Speak." "It wasn't made beyond our borders." A long silence followed. Rowan placed the black arrowhead onto the map. The ingredients came from the royal stores. Kaelan's jaw tightened. Only members of the highest council could access them, which meant his assassin hadn't crossed into the kingdom. The assassin had never left it. Kaelan slowly closed his hand around the poisoned arrow. His golden eyes hardened. "The hunter," he said softly, "is still inside my palace." As midnight settled over Silver Hollow, an unseen figure watched Lyra's bedroom window from the palace rooftops. The shadow whispered to someone hidden in the darkness. "So, the healer survived." A cold smile spread beneath the hood. Then we'll kill her before the king learns why the wolves chose her first. Morning arrived beneath a pale winter sun, but the warmth never reached the stone walls of the royal fortress. From the window of the guest chamber, Lyra watched the capital awaken. Market bells echoed through the streets. Blacksmiths opened their workshops. Hunters carried fresh game toward the western square. Children chased each other across snow-covered courtyards, while elderly women swept frost from their doorsteps. Life continued, yet beneath every smile of caution, people glanced over their shoulders before speaking. Warriors stood on nearly every corner. No one truly relaxed. Silver Hollow looked like a kingdom at peace. It felt like one waiting for war. A servant knocked softly. "Lady Lyra, His Majesty requests your company." She almost laughed. "I'm not a lady." The servant smiled politely. "Perhaps not by title." He hesitated. "But after yesterday, many people no longer see you as an ordinary healer." Lyra sighed. "I wish they still did." Kaelan waited inside a modest council room instead of the grand throne hall. Only Rowan stood beside him, studying several parchment maps spread across the table. Kaelan looked healthier than the day before, though the poison had left faint shadows beneath his eyes. The herbal medicine was working. When Lyra entered, he rolled up one of the maps. "How are the wounds?" She folded her arms. "You mean yours? They concern the kingdom. They'll heal. And yours." She blinked. "My what?" "You hardly slept." She smiled faintly. "I've spent years caring for sick animals." "You are not an animal." "No." She looked toward the snowy mountains outside. "But worrying feels familiar." For a brief moment, Kaelan almost smiled. It was becoming easier around her. He wasn't sure why. "I have a request," Kaelan said. Lyra raised an eyebrow. "You may refuse." That surprised her. Kings rarely offered refusal before making demands. "I need someone the people can trust." "You already have healers." "I have physicians." His voice remained calm. "What I lack is someone who treats rank and status the same way they treat wounds." Lyra understood immediately. He wasn't asking her to become royal. He was asking her to remain herself. "I'll help while you're recovering." She held up one finger. "Temporarily." Kaelan nodded once. "Temporarily." Neither of them realized how much that single promise would change their lives. The royal infirmary occupied an entire wing of the fortress. Its stone hall smelled of herbs, clean linen, and wood smoke. Rows of injured warriors rested beneath thick blankets. Several healers moved quickly from bed to bed. Most patients received careful treatment. Some received very little. Lyra noticed almost immediately. A young Omega sat quietly near the far wall, holding a bleeding hand wrapped in dirty cloth. No healer approached him. She walked over. "What happened?" The boy lowered his eyes. "I dropped a supply cart." "Does that usually cause cuts this deep?" He hesitated. "No." "Then what happened?" A nearby servant answered quietly. "He was whipped for wasting food." The room became very still. Lyra slowly unwrapped the blood-soaked cloth. The wounds had become infected. She looked toward the senior physician. "Why hasn't this been treated?" The man barely glanced up. Others required priority. Lyra looked around. Several nobles with bruised shoulders occupied the finest beds. The Omega sat bleeding on a wooden stool. She didn't argue. She simply gathered fresh bandages, cleaned every wound, applied herbs, then handed the boy a warm bowl of soup from her own tray. "Eat." He stared at her. "No one's allowed." "You are now." Tears quietly filled his eyes. Across the room, Kaelan had entered unnoticed. He watched everything. He said nothing, but Rowan saw the king's expression. Something inside Kaelan had hardened. Not toward Lyra, toward his own kingdom. Over the following days, stories spread faster than winter wind. The quiet healer from Ashwood Cabin treated everyone the same. Warrior, servant, hunter, child, Omega. Even prisoners received medicine if they were wounded. People began waiting specifically for her. Not because she possessed magical abilities. Because she listened. She remembered names. She explained every treatment. She never hurried someone else's pain. The fortress slowly changed. Servants smiled more often. Children stopped hiding when guards passed. Even soldiers lingered outside the infirmary, simply to thank her. Not everyone appreciated the change. Inside the High Council chamber, Voices echoed against ancient stone walls. Alpha Veros slammed his fist onto the table. This woman is disrupting centuries of order. Several nobles nodded. Servants have begun questioning commands. Healers are ignoring rank. Even wolves wander the palace freely now. Veros leaned forward. This begins with one outsider. It ends with rebellion. Across the table, Elder Mira quietly turned another page of an ancient manuscript. Without looking up, she asked, "Does kindness frighten you that much?" Veros's jaw tightened. Kindness weakens discipline. No. Elder Mira finally met his eyes. Cruelty weakens loyalty. Silence followed. Veros looked away first. That afternoon, Lyra left the fortress to gather fresh winter herbs beyond the city walls. Finn padded silently beside her. The old gray wolf never demanded attention. He simply appeared whenever she ventured outdoors. His slow, steady presence felt strangely comforting. "You know," Lyra smiled as they crossed a frozen stream. "I still don't understand why you follow me." Finn merely blinked. His scarred tail brushed softly against the snow. She laughed quietly. "I suppose that's your answer." As they climbed toward whispering pines, several smaller wolves emerged from the trees. None showed aggression. Instead, each approached carefully before lowering its head. One young wolf carried an injured paw. Another had frostbite along one ear. Lyra knelt immediately. "Oh, you poor thing." She treated each wound patiently. Finn watched from nearby, almost proudly. When she finished, every wolf touched its nose gently against her hand before disappearing back into the forest. Hidden among the trees, unknown eyes observed everything. A cloaked rider turned his horse around without making a sound. He had witnessed enough. That evening, Rowan approached Kaelan carrying another report. It happened again. Kaelan looked up from his desk. "What happened?" "The palace wolves. They refused commands. They ignored every handler." Rowan hesitated. "They followed Lyra instead." Kaelan leaned back thoughtfully. "Not because she ordered them. No. They simply chose her." Kaelan walked toward the balcony, overlooking the snowy courtyards. Below, Lyra crossed the castle grounds carrying baskets of herbs. Finn walked beside her. Behind them, more than 20 palace wolves moved quietly in perfect formation. No commands, no whistles, no chains, only trust. Kaelan had ruled wolves his entire life. He understood dominance. He understood loyalty. This was neither. It was something older, something no alpha could command. 3 nights later, the kingdom gathered for the first snow blessing, one of Silver Hollow's oldest winter traditions. Families filled the moon courtyard, carrying silver lanterns. Children tied white ribbons to evergreen branches. The high priest stood before the sacred altar, preparing to call forth Aster, the oldest ceremonial wolf in the kingdom. 4 generations, Aster had approached only the high priest during the blessing. It had never happened differently. The great white wolf emerged from the shadows. The crowd fell silent. The high priest extended his hand confidently. "Aster!" The wolf stopped, looked at him, then slowly turned away. Gasps rippled through the gathering. Aster ignored the priest completely. Instead, he walked calmly through the crowd, past nobles, past warriors, past the Alpha Council, straight toward Lyra. She looked around in confusion. "Me!" The ancient wolf lowered his massive head beneath her trembling hand. The entire courtyard stood frozen. Even Kaelan stared in disbelief. Elder Mira quietly closed her eyes, as if she had been expecting this moment for many years. Far across the square, Alpha Veros watched with growing hatred. His hands slowly curled into fists. He whispered beneath his breath, "So, the legends are true." That night, Elder Mira unlocked a forgotten chamber beneath the royal library. Dust-covered shelves untouched for generations. She removed an ancient scroll sealed with the crest of the moon goddess. As she carefully broke the faded wax, a single title appeared across the brittle parchment, "The Last Moonkeeper," and beside the title, someone had scratched out an entire bloodline with a knife. Long before dawn touched the mountains, the palace library was already awake. Candles flickered behind towering shelves carved from black cedar. Dust drifted lazily through narrow beams of moonlight that slipped between stained glass windows. Scrolls older than the kingdom itself rested in silence, waiting for hands that had almost forgotten them. Deep beneath the library, hidden behind a revolving stone wall, Elder Mira carefully unrolled the ancient parchment she had discovered the night before. The brittle pages trembled beneath her fingers. Time had not been kind to the manuscript. Neither had people. Entire passages had been burned away. Names had been scratched out. Symbols had been chiseled from the margins with deliberate hatred. Someone hadn't wanted this history forgotten by accident. Someone had erased it on purpose. Mira adjusted her spectacles and began reading aloud. When wolves no longer feared one another, when every pack gathered beneath one moon, the kingdom prospered under the guidance of the Moon Keeper. She stopped. Another sentence had been carved away with a blade. Only a few words remained. Chosen not by blood, chosen by nothing else. The rest had been destroyed. Mira closed her eyes. So they feared the truth. Elsewhere in the fortress, Lyra had already begun her morning rounds. She moved quietly through the infirmary, replacing bandages, checking fevers, and speaking softly to frightened children whose parents had been injured on the borders. She never rushed. Every patient received the same gentle attention, even those who had nothing to offer in return. A young warrior winced as she tightened the wrap around his shoulder. "I've seen royal healers all my life," he admitted. "They always treated the wound." Lyra looked up. "And you treat the person?" She smiled without answering. The young man watched her move toward the next bed. Only after she left did he whisper to another soldier, "No wonder the wolves trust her." Kaelan entered the infirmary shortly afterward. The room immediately fell silent, not because people feared him, because everyone respected him. He acknowledged each patient with a quiet nod before stopping beside Lyra. "You've been working since before sunrise." She continued grinding herbs. "So have you. My duties can wait." "Mine can't." Kaelan watched her carefully. "Do you ever rest?" She finally looked at him. "When someone stops hurting." A faint breath escaped him. It almost sounded like laughter. "You've set yourself an impossible condition." "I know. Then why keep trying?" Lyra lowered her eyes to the herbs. "My father used to say." She hesitated. "We cannot heal the whole world." She crushed another leaf beneath the stone pestle. "But we can heal the part of it standing in front of us." Kaelan remained silent. The words settled somewhere deep inside him. He had spent years trying to protect an entire kingdom. Perhaps he had forgotten how to protect one person at a time. Later that afternoon, Elder Mira requested a private meeting. Kaelan arrived first. Lyra entered moments later, brushing snow from her cloak. The old historian closed the chamber door behind them. No guards remained outside. No servants lingered nearby. Only silence. Mira laid the damaged scroll across a stone table. "I believe," she said quietly, "that both of you deserve to know what I found." Lyra stared at the ancient writing. "I can't read the old script." "I'll translate." Mira gently traced a faded illustration. It depicted a woman standing beneath a full moon. Around her sat wolves of every color and every rank. None wore collars. None bared their teeth. They simply rested peacefully together. The chronicles call her the first moonkeeper. Kaelan folded his arms. "I've heard the name. As a children's legend." Mira nodded. "That is exactly what someone wanted." She pointed toward the damaged sections. "These records were once stored in every temple. Now only this copy remains." Lyra frowned. "What is a moonkeeper?" Mira looked directly at her. "Not a queen. Not a sorceress. Not an alpha." She paused. "A bridge. The rarest soul our people have ever known." Lyra waited. The moonkeeper possessed no extraordinary strength, no unmatched speed, no gift for battle. Her gift was far more dangerous. Kaelan's eyes narrowed. "Dangerous." Mira nodded slowly. "She united wolves without fear." The room fell silent. The greatest alpha could command obedience. The moonkeeper inspired willing loyalty. "There is a difference." Lyra looked almost uncomfortable. "You think that's me?" "I think," Mira answered carefully. "The wolves have already given us their answer." Lyra immediately shook her head. "No. They trust me because I don't hurt them. Nothing more. You underestimate yourself. I refuse to pretend destiny makes someone important." She looked at Kaelan. "My choices matter, not prophecies." Kaelan surprised both women by speaking. "I agree." Lyra blinked. You do. He nodded. If you had abandoned me during the storm. He held her gaze. No prophecy would have changed the outcome. His voice remained calm. You became extraordinary through what you chose, not through what you were. For the first time, Lyra struggled to answer. That evening, the palace prepared for the moon oath ceremony. It was the oldest tradition in Silver Hollow. Every winter, the ruling Alpha renewed his promise to protect every pack beneath the same moon. Hundreds gathered within the sacred den, an enormous cavern hidden beneath the mountain. Crystal formations reflected pale moonlight across underground pools. Ancient wolves rested quietly along the stone walls. The atmosphere felt less like a ceremony and more like a prayer. Kaelan stood before the sacred flame. His injured shoulder remained bandaged beneath ceremonial armor. The high priest began the ancient oath. I stand before the moon goddess. Suddenly, Finn lifted his head. A deep growl echoed through the cavern. Another wolf answered, then another. Within seconds, dozens of ancient wolves rose simultaneously. Not aggressively, expectantly. Every eye turned toward the entrance. Lyra had just arrived. She had almost missed the ceremony after treating a sick child in the lower village. The wolves immediately moved. One after another. They surrounded her. Not trapping her. Protecting her. The crowd gasped. Several nobles stepped backward. The high priest lowered his ceremonial staff. No command had summoned them. No signal had been given. The wolves had simply chosen. Lyra stood frozen. Finn gently nudged her hand. She instinctively rested her fingers against his scarred head. Every wolf settled peacefully onto the stone floor. The sacred den became perfectly still. Even Kaelan looked astonished. Not because the wolves obeyed, because they appeared content, as though the presence of one quiet healer had calmed creatures older than the kingdom itself. Elder Mira whispered almost to herself. The blessing never vanished. We simply forgot how to recognize it. Not everyone shared her wonder. Hidden among the watching nobles, Alpha Veros quietly slipped away. His expression had lost all patience. Inside a deserted corridor, a hooded messenger waited. Veros spoke without hesitation. The old stories are awakening. The messenger remained silent. Veros's voice grew colder. The girl cannot be allowed to survive long enough for the kingdom to believe them. He removed a small leather pouch from beneath his cloak. Inside rested another black arrow. Its iron tip shimmered with the same poison that had nearly killed Kaelan. This time, he whispered, we don't miss. The ceremony ended peacefully. Lyra insisted on walking back to her chamber alone. The palace corridors were quiet beneath the silver glow of moonlight filtering through high windows. She carried a basket of fresh herbs in one arm. Finn walked several steps behind her. Halfway through the eastern courtyard, Finn suddenly stopped. Every muscle in the old wolf's body became rigid. His ears flattened. A low warning growl rolled from his chest. Lyra turned. What is it? Silence. Then, a sharp whistle cut through the air. Instinct made Finn leap. An arrow exploded through the darkness. Instead of striking Lyra's heart, it buried itself deep into the stone pillar behind her, missing by less than an inch. The black poison hissed as it touched the cold rock. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, footsteps disappeared into the night. Lyra stared at the arrow, then slowly looked at Finn. The old wolf stood directly between her and the shadows, his scarred body trembling, his amber eyes fixed on the darkness. Someone hadn't tried to kill the Alpha King. Someone had just tried to kill her. Moments later, Kaelan arrived with Rowan and the royal guard. He examined the poisoned arrow in silence. Then his gaze hardened in a way Lyra had never seen before. Without looking away from the weapon, he spoke only 4 words. The hunt begins tonight. The poisoned arrow lay across the council table. No one touched it. Its black iron tip still carried a faint oily sheen, and even after hours had passed, the poison seemed to drink the candlelight instead of reflecting it. Kaelan stood at the head of the chamber, one hand resting on the cold stone. His golden eyes moved slowly from one council member to another. The poison came from our royal stores. Silence. The arrow was crafted by one of our own Fletchers. More silence. And last night, his voice became quieter. Someone attempted to murder the woman who saved this kingdom's king. No one answered. Not because they had nothing to say, because every person in the room had begun wondering who might be sitting beside the assassin. At the far end of the table, Alpha Veros folded his hands calmly. A tragic incident. His expression carried practiced sympathy. But perhaps we should ask why assassins suddenly appear wherever the healer goes. Several nobles exchanged uncertain glances. Veros continued. First His Majesty is attacked. Then ancient wolves abandon tradition. Now sacred ceremonies are disrupted. He leaned back. Too many strange things follow one woman. Lyra remained silent. Kaelan noticed. She never defended herself first. She always waited. Veros smiled faintly. Coincidences deserve investigation. Before Lyra could respond, Kaelan spoke. So do accusations. The room immediately fell still. If you possess evidence, Kaelan said evenly, present it. Veros held the king's gaze. I intend to. By noon, Kaelan had reached a decision. We leave tomorrow. Rowan looked up from the map. For where? The border packs. Lyra frowned. Your shoulder isn't fully healed. It will heal faster on horseback than sitting in meetings. That's medically impossible. I know. A faint smile appeared in his eyes. I wanted to see if you would argue. She sighed. You've become difficult. I've always been difficult. You've simply recovered enough energy to prove it. Rowan looked between them and quietly hid a smile. Only a week ago, the king had barely spoken. Now, around Lyra, he occasionally allowed humor to exist. Small, brief, but real. The journey began before sunrise. No royal parade, no banners. Only Kaelan, Lyra, Rowan, 6 trusted guards, and Finn padding steadily beside the horses. Kaelan had insisted on traveling quietly. If the conspiracy reaches into the palace, he explained, it reaches our roads as well. The mountains welcomed them with crisp air and endless forests glazed in silver frost. The farther they traveled from the capital, the more obvious the kingdom's suffering became. Empty hunting cabins, collapsed bridges, fields abandoned before harvest. Entire villages surviving on dried roots and frozen fish. Lyra noticed something else. No wolves. Not a single one. The forests feel. She searched for the word. Lonely. Kaelan nodded. They do. Their first stop was Frostbrook, a small border settlement tucked between towering cliffs. Smoke rose from only half the chimneys. The remaining houses stood dark and empty. Children no longer laughed in the streets. An elderly woman greeted them with tired eyes. She recognized Kaelan immediately. Instead of kneeling, she simply bowed her head. My king. Kaelan stepped forward. You don't owe me ceremony. You owe me truth. She looked surprised. He continued. What happened here? The old woman gestured toward abandoned homes. Our hunters vanished. Our wolves stopped returning. Food caravans disappeared. We begged the Iron Fang pack for help. And they took what little grain we had left. Lyra looked toward Kaelan. Iron Fang. He answered quietly. Veros's territory. The old woman lowered her voice. They said protection has a price. Later that afternoon, Lyra treated a young boy whose leg had been crushed beneath fallen timber. His mother apologized repeatedly. We have nothing to pay you. Lyra smiled warmly. You already have. The woman looked confused. You trusted me. She carefully adjusted the splint. That's enough. The little boy reached into his pocket and handed Lyra a tiny wooden wolf carved with clumsy hands. I made it. She accepted it as though it were precious gold. I'll keep it forever. From several steps away, Kaelan watched the exchange. Kings often rewarded loyalty with coin. Lyra rewarded dignity by accepting kindness from those who believed they had nothing to give. It was a lesson no council chamber had ever taught him. That evening, the group camped near the edge of Whispering Pines. Snow drifted gently between ancient evergreens. The guards prepared fires while Rowan checked Kaelan's wound. It looks better. The herbs are doing their work. They're Lyra's herbs. They're becoming ours. Nearby, Lyra quietly prepared medicine for everyone, not just the king. She distributed warm tea to exhausted guards before serving herself last. One young soldier hesitated. My lady! I'm not a lady. He smiled sheepishly. Then, he held up the steaming cup. Thank you, Lyra. She returned the smile. It felt strange hearing her name spoken without suspicion. Night settled peacefully, then suddenly lifted his head. Without warning, he walked into the darkness beyond the firelight. Lyra followed, Fun! The old wolf glanced back only once before continuing deeper into the forest. She trusted him. After several minutes, they reached a narrow clearing where moonlight poured through broken branches. There, waiting silently among the snow, stood 12 wild wolves. None growled, none moved. They simply watched Lyra. One by one they approached. An old female wolf carried a deep wound along her flank. A younger black wolf limped badly. Another had a hunting trap still clamped around one paw. Lyra immediately knelt. "Oh!" She reached carefully toward the injured female. "You've been suffering for days." The wolf lowered herself without hesitation. Finn sat quietly nearby, observing like an old guardian overseeing an ancient ritual. For nearly an hour, Lyra cleaned wounds, removed the rusted trap, and wrapped torn flesh with strips of linen. Not once did a wolf bare its teeth. Not once did fear enter the clearing. When she finally finished, the oldest female gently pressed her forehead against Lyra's shoulder. Then every wolf turned toward Kaelan, who had silently arrived with Rowan. The wolves lowered their heads to the king. Then, they looked back to Lyra. It wasn't a choice between them. It was recognition of both. Kaelan understood. They honored the Alpha, but they trusted the healer. Those were not the same thing. The following morning brought another discovery. A supply wagon had been attacked along the eastern road. Its cargo was gone. The drivers had survived. Barely. Rowan examined the broken crates. No ordinary bandits. Kaelan crouched beside unusual boot prints pressed into the snow. They wore military boots. One guard looked confused. "Our own soldiers?" Kaelan shook his head. "No." He picked up a torn piece of black fabric caught on a splintered wheel. "Iron Fong." The attacks weren't random. Someone had been starving the border packs deliberately. Food shortages created desperation. Desperation created fear. Fear made people welcome strong rulers. It was a strategy, not chaos. That afternoon, the travelers entered Iron Fong territory. The difference was immediate. The villages weren't poor. They were armed. Warriors stood on rooftops. Children practiced with wooden spears instead of toys. Every conversation stopped as Kaelan's group passed. Discipline ruled here, not trust. At the center of the largest village stood Alpha Veros. He welcomed them with an effortless smile. "My king!" He bowed perfectly. What an unexpected honor. Kaelan dismounted. "I've come to inspect the borders." "And your healer?" Veros's eyes drifted toward Lyra. "I've heard fascinating stories." Lyra met his gaze calmly. "I prefer true ones." His smile widened. "I imagine you do." That evening, a gathering was held in the village square. Veros addressed the people first. "My friends." His powerful voice carried easily. "Our kingdom faces dangerous times." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Wolves abandon ancient customs. Old legends return. Strange miracles appear. He slowly turned toward Lyra. And sometimes, he paused just long enough for every eye to follow him. Dark magic hides behind acts of kindness. The square fell silent. Several villagers stepped backward. A frightened mother pulled her child closer. Veros raised his hand dramatically. "Ask yourselves, why do wolves obey her? Why do sacred beasts ignore tradition? Why does misfortune follow wherever she goes?" No one answered, because fear had already begun whispering its own answers. Lyra stood motionless. She could have argued. She could have shouted. Instead, she simply looked at the frightened faces before her. People weren't her enemies. Fear was. Kaelan stepped forward. His voice remained calm, but every word struck like stone. "I have known Alpha Veros for many years." The crowd listened. "I have known Lyra Ashwood." He looked toward her. For only a short time, he let the silence linger. "But I know this." He turned back to the villagers. "One of them gains power by making you afraid." His eyes settled firmly on Veros. "The other gains nothing except the chance to ease your suffering." The square became deathly quiet. For the first time, doubt appeared on Veros's face. Not because he had been defeated, because Kaelan had chosen to stand beside Lyra in public. Late that night, as the camp slept beneath the whispering pines, a hooded messenger rode hard into Iron Fong Keep. He knelt before Veros and spoke only one sentence. "The border packs are beginning to believe the healer instead of fearing you." Veros's expression turned cold. He slowly unsheathed his sword and whispered, "Then tomorrow, will make the entire kingdom fear her. By the time Kaelan and his companions returned to Silver Hollow, the rumors had outrun their horses. They drifted through the kingdom like smoke. Some whispered that Lyra had bewitched the wolves. Others claimed the moon goddess herself had sent her. In taverns, frightened travelers lowered their voices when speaking her name. In marketplaces, mothers pulled curious children closer whenever palace wolves wandered peacefully behind her. No one knew the truth. Fear rarely waited for truth. It only needed uncertainty. The summons arrived the following morning. Every alpha, every elder, every council member, every high priest, the entire kingdom would gather beneath the full moon in the great assembly hall. The charges were simple, dangerously simple. Lyra Ashwood stands accused of using forbidden power to influence the wolves of Silver Hollow. Lyra read the parchment twice, then quietly folded it. Rowan paced the room. This is madness. They don't have evidence. They don't need evidence, Lyra answered softly. They only need enough frightened people. Kaelan stood near the frost-covered window, saying nothing. His silence worried Rowan more than anger ever could. Finally, Kaelan turned. Will you come? Lyra met his eyes. If I refuse, the rumors win. She nodded once. Then I'll stand before them, not because she expected mercy, but because hiding would betray everything she believed. Night fell. The moon rose full and brilliant above the mountain peaks. Its silver light poured across the ancient stone amphitheater where Alpha Kings had judged disputes for nearly 1,000 years. Massive braziers burned along the circular walls. Thousands filled the stone seats. Warriors, hunters, healers, servants, nobles, even ordinary villagers had traveled for days to witness the trial. Above them all stood enormous statues of the first Alpha rulers, silent, watching, as if history itself had come to observe what Silver Hollow would become. Lyra entered without ceremony. She wore the same deep green cloak she had worn on the night of the storm. No jewels, no crown, no expensive silks, only worn leather boots, and hands still marked by herbs and medicine. Whispers followed her. She doesn't even look frightened. Maybe that's because she's guilty. No, an elderly woman murmured nearby. She looks tired. Kaelan entered moments later. Every warrior stood immediately. The Alpha King acknowledged them with a quiet nod before taking his place upon the central stone platform. He did not sit. Neither would he while another person's fate remained undecided. Alpha Veros stepped forward first. He looked every bit the confident leader. Strong, well-spoken, certain. My fellow Alphas, his voice echoed through the amphitheater. Our kingdom has survived because we respected the ancient order. He slowly began walking around the circular platform. Each wolf knows its place. Each pack knows its duty. But now, he stopped beside Lyra. One outsider has overturned traditions older than memory. He gestured toward the gathered wolves, resting beyond the assembly walls. They abandon their handlers. They ignore sacred commands. They follow her. His voice grew louder. If this is not forbidden magic, he spread his hands dramatically. Then explain it. The crowd murmured. Questions spread like ripples across still water. Veros smiled inwardly. Confusion always favored the loudest voice. Kaelan looked toward Lyra. You may answer. She stepped forward slowly. Hundreds of eyes settled upon her. Thousands more waited beyond the walls. For several heartbeats, she said nothing. Then she quietly spoke. I don't know why wolves trust me. The crowd blinked. No excuses. No speeches. Only honesty. I've wondered the same thing. She looked toward the ancient wolves lying peacefully outside the assembly. I never asked them to follow me. I never commanded them. I only treated their wounds. She paused. If that is a crime. Her voice remained calm. Then I have nothing else to defend. Silence spread across the amphitheater. Her answer sounded too simple, which somehow made it harder to dismiss. Veros struck immediately. A convenient story. He clapped his hands sharply. The great wooden gates opened. Several warriors dragged an enormous black wolf into the center of the arena. Heavy iron chains wrapped around its neck and legs. The animal snarled violently. Foam gathered around its jaws. Its left shoulder carried a deep infected spear wound. One guard whispered nervously, "Rogue!" The word alone made many spectators recoil. Rogue wolves belonged to no pack. Most had survived years of hunger, betrayal, and violence. Few trusted anyone. Veros raised his voice. This beast has attacked travelers. It obeys no alpha. It fears no warrior. He looked directly at Lyra. If your kindness truly reaches every wolf. His smile returned. Prove it. The chains were released. Gasps echoed around the arena. The injured wolf staggered forward, breathing heavily. Its yellow eyes burned with pain. Not hatred. Pain. The guards reached for their weapons. Lyra slowly lifted one hand. No. Kaelan noticed she wasn't looking at the wolf's teeth. She was watching its injured shoulder. She had already seen the real problem. Without waiting for permission, Lyra walked forward. Every step echoed across the stone floor. Rowan held his breath. The rogue lowered its head. A deep growl rolled through its chest. The distance between them closed. 20 steps. 10. 5. The wolf suddenly lunged. The crowd screamed. Warriors rushed forward. Stand down. Kaelan's voice cut through the chaos like steel. No one moved. Not because they weren't afraid, because they trusted their king. The wolf stopped only inches from Lyra. Its hot breath drifted through the freezing air. Slowly, she knelt, not in surrender, to place herself at eye level. I know. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. It hurts. The growling weakened. She noticed the iron chain had rubbed raw skin beneath its neck. Carefully, very carefully, she reached toward the wound. Every muscle in the arena tightened. Her fingertips touched blood-soaked fur. The rogue flinched, but it didn't bite. Lyra gently removed broken splinters, buried inside the spear wound. Fresh blood stained her hands. It's infected. She looked toward Rowan. I need clean water. Rowan was already moving. Not because Kaelan ordered him. Because he understood. This was no longer a trial. It was simply a wounded patient receiving treatment. Several long minutes passed. The only sounds came from Lyra quietly cleaning the wound and the wolf's gradually calming breathing. Finally, she wrapped fresh bandages around its shoulder. There. She smiled softly. That should ease the pain. The rogue stared at her. Then, before anyone could react, the enormous wolf slowly lowered itself beside her feet. Its head rested gently against her knee. Complete silence swallowed the amphitheater. A child in the audience whispered, It trusts her. An old hunter quietly answered, No. His eyes filled with tears. She gave it a reason to. One by one, the wolves waiting outside the assembly began entering through the open gates. Finn walked first. Behind him came palace wolves, border wolves, young wolves, scarred elders. Even 2 rogues approached cautiously. None growled. None threatened anyone. They simply gathered around Lyra. Not worshipping. Not protecting. Belonging. The image struck every heart in the amphitheater. For the first time in generations, wolves from rival packs rested together without conflict. No alpha had accomplished that. Not even Kaelan. Elder Mira slowly rose from her seat. Her voice carried surprising strength. For years, she said, we searched the heavens for a blessing we believed had abandoned us. She looked around the assembly, but perhaps the blessing never disappeared. She turned toward Lyra. Perhaps we simply stopped recognizing compassion when it stood before us. No one interrupted. Even Veros remained silent. Because, for one impossible moment, fear had no argument. But fear never surrendered quietly. Veros suddenly laughed. A cold, humorless sound. So this is what our kingdom has become. He stepped backward. We kneel before healers. We allow wolves to choose our future. His eyes swept across the gathered alphas. If this continues, his voice thundered across the arena, there will soon be no kingdom left to save. He tore the iron fang crest from his cloak and threw it onto the stone floor. I reject this counsel. I reject this weakness. And from this night forward, he pointed directly at Kaelan. Iron Fang stands alone. The words echoed like the first crack in a frozen lake. Every alpha understood what they meant. Not disagreement. War. Kaelan slowly stepped down from the central platform. He stopped beside Lyra. Without speaking, he offered her his hand. Not because she needed rescuing. Because he was choosing where he stood. Lyra looked at his hand for only a heartbeat before accepting it. Together, they turned to face the gathering. No king. No healer. Simply two people refusing to let fear decide the kingdom's future. Around them, the wolves rose as one. Their united howl shook the mountains. It sounded less like a warning, and more like a promise. Before dawn broke over Silver Hollow, smoke appeared on the northern horizon. Then another. Then another. A breathless scout burst through the palace gates, falling to one knee before Kaelan. "My king!" His voice trembled. Iron Fang banners have crossed the river. He swallowed hard. They're marching on the capital. The war that had been whispering through the kingdom had finally begun. The first war horns sounded before sunrise. Their deep, mournful calls rolled across the snow-covered valleys, echoing from one mountain to the next until the entire kingdom seemed to awaken in fear. From the highest tower of the royal fortress, Kaelan watched long lines of torches winding through the northern pass. Iron Fang had come, not with raiding parties, not with threats, with an army. Thousands of warriors marched beneath black banners embroidered with a crimson wolf's head. Behind them came siege wagons, supply trains, and ranks of wolves armored in dark leather. Varos had not come to negotiate. He had come to replace a king. Inside the fortress, bells rang without pause. Children were guided into underground shelters. Blacksmiths abandoned sleep to forge weapons. Bakers turned every grain of flour into bread for soldiers. Healers transformed banquet halls into infirmaries. Messengers sprinted through icy streets carrying orders from one district to another. The kingdom had rehearsed this moment for generations. No one had believed it would truly come. Lyra stood in the center of the growing chaos. Warriors rushed past carrying shields. Servants hauled barrels of clean water. She caught the arm of a frightened young healer. "Stop!" The girl froze. I don't know what to do." Lyra placed both hands on her shoulders. "You already do." She pointed toward the rows of empty beds. "One patient at a time." The girl's breathing slowed. She nodded, then hurried toward the infirmary. Rowan watched from nearby. "How do you keep everyone calm?" Lyra looked around the room. "I don't." She picked up another basket of bandages. "I simply remind them of the next thing they can do." Kaelan entered moments later, wearing black ceremonial armor etched with silver runes. His shoulder had not fully healed. The movement of fastening his breastplate still caused pain. He ignored it. His gaze immediately found Lyra. "The eastern districts are evacuating." She nodded. "The infirmary is ready. Our scouts report Varos will reach the outer walls before noon." She looked at him carefully. "You've hardly slept." "Neither have you." For the first time since they had met, neither tried to hide their concern for the other. It no longer needed words. By midday, Iron Fang surrounded Silver Hollow. The enemy stretched across the frozen valley like a dark tide. War drums thundered beneath gray skies. Catapults rolled into position. Above the fortress walls, Kaelan surveyed the battlefield. Beside him stood Rowan, Elder Mira, and the commanders of the remaining loyal packs. One place remained empty. Varos had once stood there. Now, he stood below, mounted on a black horse. His armor reflected almost no light. He raised one hand. The battlefield became silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. "Kaelan," he shouted, "you still have time." His voice carried effortlessly across the valley. "Hand over the healer. The kingdom survives. Refuse. And by sunset these walls will belong to me." Every eye turned toward Kaelan. The Alpha King stepped onto the battlements. His answer came without hesitation. "No. Nothing more. No speeches. No insults. Just one word." It echoed more powerfully than any war horn. Varos smiled. "So be it." He lowered his hand. The first stones flew. The battle erupted. Massive boulders slammed into fortress walls. Arrows darkened the sky. The clash of steel echoed through the valley as warriors met outside the gates. Snow quickly disappeared beneath churned earth and crimson blood. Yet inside the fortress, a different battle unfolded. Lyra moved tirelessly through the infirmary. One wounded soldier after another. Broken bones. Arrow wounds. Burns. Frostbite. She never hurried. Never panicked. Every patient received the same quiet reassurance. "You're safe. Stay with me. Breathe." Outside, kingdoms fought over power. Inside, she fought for every single life. Hours passed. The defenders held. Barely. A messenger stumbled into the infirmary. "The western gate." He struggled to breathe. They're breaking through. Before panic could spread, Lyra climbed onto a wooden table. Listen to me. The room gradually quieted. If the gates fall. She looked at every frightened face. These people will still need us. No dramatic speech followed. She simply returned to bandaging another child. The healers exchanged determined looks, then silently resumed their work. Courage spread through actions, not words. Meanwhile, Kaelan fought at the western wall. His sword moved with calm precision. Every strike protected another warrior. Every order saved lives. He never chased glory, only necessity. Rowan arrived beside him. The southern tower is holding. Kaelan nodded. The eastern? Still secure. Then another scout appeared. My king! He pointed toward the forests beyond the battlefield. There are wolves. Kaelan frowned. I know. No. The scout swallowed. Thousands. Far beyond the smoke of war. Movement rippled through the snow-covered trees. Gray wolves emerged first. Then silver. Then black. Then enormous white alphas from distant mountain packs. More kept coming. Not hundreds. Thousands. The army on both sides slowly noticed. Varros laughed. So, he drew his sword. At last. He expected the wolves to charge beside him. Instead, they ignored both armies. They ran directly toward the fortress, straight toward Lyra. She had just stepped outside the infirmary carrying fresh water when the first wolves entered the courtyard. Gasps echoed from every direction. Finn walked at their front, old, scarred, proud. He stopped before Lyra, then looked toward the battlefield. She followed his gaze. Beyond the shattered gates, warriors were dying because fear had divided them. She understood, not through magic, not through prophecy, simply through compassion. The wolves weren't asking for orders. They were asking whether she still believed every life mattered. She slowly stepped forward. Her voice remained gentle. No unnecessary killing. The wolves watched her. If someone surrenders, she looked into their eyes. Let them live. Finn lowered his head once, then turned. The pack surged forward like a silver river. The impossible happened. Instead of attacking blindly, the wolves separated with remarkable discipline. Some shielded fleeing civilians. Others intercepted charging warhorses without killing them. Several dragged wounded warriors, friend and enemy alike, away from the fighting. The battlefield began changing. Confusion spread through Iron Fang's ranks. They're not attacking. They're protecting people. What are they doing? Fear depended upon hatred. Compassion made hatred hesitate. That hesitation broke Pharaoh's strategy. One after another, border pack warriors lower their weapons. They watched wolves protecting children from both armies. They watched Lyra treating enemy soldiers exactly as she treated her own. An Iron Fang captain slowly removed his helmet. We were told she was a monster. Another looked toward Lyra. Monsters don't save strangers. The first captain dropped his sword. Soon another followed. Then another. The rebellion began collapsing from within. Not because it had been defeated, because its lies no longer matched reality. Pharaohs roared in fury. Cowards! He rode straight through his own retreating warriors. If fear won't move you, he raised his sword. I will. He charged directly toward Lyra. Kaelan saw him instantly. Their eyes met across the battlefield. Neither hesitated. Both ran. Varros reached Lyra first. His sword rose high above his head. This kingdom was never meant for mercy. Before the blade could fall, a gray shape exploded between them. Fun. The old wolf struck Varros with every ounce of strength left in his aging body. The sword changed direction. Instead of Lyra, it cut deep across Fun's side. Time seemed to stop. Fun collapsed into the snow. A sharp cry escaped Lyra before she fell beside him. No! Her hands immediately pressed against the wound. Blood warmed the frozen ground. Fun looked at her. His tired amber eyes held no fear, only peace. The same quiet peace they had carried since the day he first rested his head beneath her hand. You can't leave! Her voice trembled. I'm not finished arguing with you. Fun gave the faintest movement of his tail, almost the same tiny gesture the wounded white wolf had made in her cabin, as if saying, You were never alone. Then his breathing slowed. The old guardian became still. The wolves surrounding them lifted their heads. A single mournful howl rose into the winter sky. Soon another joined it, then another, until the mountains themselves seemed to grieve. Kaelan reached Lyra's side just as she closed Fun's eyes with trembling fingers. He knelt beside her. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Kaelan rested one hand gently on her shoulder. Not to pull her away, simply to remind her she did not have to carry this sorrow alone. Lyra covered Fun with her own cloak, then slowly stood. Tears remained on her face, but her voice, when she spoke, was steady. No more death. She looked toward Kaelan. End this. Kaelan nodded once. He turned to face Varos. The Alpha King raised his sword. I challenge you. His voice carried across the silent battlefield. One king. One traitor. No more innocent blood. Varos smiled coldly. I was hoping you'd ask. The two Alphas stepped into the snow-covered clearing as both armies and thousands of wolves fell silent. The fate of Silver Hollow would now be decided by a single battle. The first clash of their swords rang across the valley like thunder. Then, as Kaelan and Varos circled each other beneath the falling snow, Elder Mira looked toward the eastern mountains. A faint silver light had appeared above the ancient moon temple. She whispered in disbelief, "The goddess is watching." Snow fell in slow, silent flakes. The battlefield that had roared with steel only moments before now held its breath. No warrior moved. No wolf growled. Even the wounded seemed to wait. At the center of the valley, Kaelan Draven and Alpha Varos circled one another beneath a sky washed in pale winter light. Their boots carved careful paths through crimson-stained snow. Varos smiled first. You've changed. Kaelan's sword remained steady. So have you. No. Varos shook his head. I simply accepted what the world truly is. He gestured toward the battlefield. The strong rule. The weak obey. The frightened survive. Kaelan answered quietly. No. The frightened only postpone dying. For the first time that day, Varos's smile disappeared. He attacked without warning. Steel met steel. The sound echoed across the valley. Varos fought like a storm. Every strike was powerful enough to split shields. Every movement carried years of relentless discipline. He wasn't merely strong. He was exceptional. Kaelan gave ground. Not because he was weaker. Because he watched, studied, measured. That had always been his greatest strength. Observe first. Act second. The lesson his father had taught him before the old king had been murdered. Varos mistook patience for hesitation. He attacked harder, faster. His blows forced Kaelan backward through the snow. The watching warriors exchanged anxious glances. Then Kaelan noticed it. A pattern. Varos always favored his right shoulder after heavy swings. An old injury. Hidden, but real. Kaelan changed his footing. The next strike came exactly as expected. He stepped aside. Varos overextended. For the first time, the traitor lost his balance. Kaelan struck, not toward the heart, toward the sword. Steel flew from Varos's hand, spinning across the frozen ground. Silence. Kaelan's blade rested against Varos's throat. It was over. No one spoke. The entire battlefield waited for the inevitable. Revenge. Justice. Execution. Varos slowly laughed. So, his voice sounded tired. You'll become exactly like every king before you. Kaelan looked at him for a long moment, then lowered his sword. Gasp swept through both armies. Varos stared in disbelief. You! Kaelan interrupted quietly. My father taught me something before he died. He stepped back. A king who kills because he must, and a king who kills because he can, are not the same man. He turned toward the gathered warriors. Varos will stand trial before every pack. No secret executions. No hidden justice. The kingdom deserves truth. Several Iron Fang warriors slowly lowered their weapons. Not because they feared Kaelan, because they suddenly understood him. Varos looked around desperately. The fear that had always obeyed him was gone. His own captains refused to meet his eyes. The border warriors stepped away from him. Even the wolves that had once followed Iron Fang remained beside Lyra. Power built upon fear had collapsed the moment people stopped believing it. Varos fell to his knees, not before Kaelan, before the weight of everything he had destroyed. Royal guards quietly led him away. He did not resist. The battle ended without another sword being raised. Across the valley, warriors from opposing sides began carrying the wounded together. Ironfang's soldiers helped rebuild broken carts. Royal healers treated enemy injuries before returning to their own. Lyra moved through the battlefield exactly as she always had, one patient at a time. She cleaned wounds, comforted frightened children, closed the eyes of those who could not be saved. She mourned every life equally. Friend, enemy, wolf, human. War had never changed who she was. As evening settled over Silver Hollow, the kingdom gathered on the same hill where Fun had fallen. The old gray wolf lay beneath a blanket of white mountain flowers. Children from every pack quietly placed carved wooden wolves beside him. The little boy from Frostbrook stepped forward last. He carefully laid the tiny wooden wolf he had carved's twin beside Fun. "My mother says," he whispered, "heroes help everyone." Lyra's eyes filled with tears. She knelt beside the grave. "You found me," she said softly, long before anyone else did. Kaelan stood beside her in silence. After a while he spoke. "I think." He looked toward the distant forests. "He was making sure I did too." Lyra smiled through tears. "I think you're right." The wolves lifted one long, gentle howl. It no longer sounded like grief. It sounded like gratitude. Weeks passed. Winter slowly loosened its grip. Snow melted from rooftops. Frozen rivers began flowing again. For the first time in years, merchants traveled safely between border villages. Children played outside after sunset. The kingdom breathed differently. The Alpha Council met once more. This time, the great circular chamber looked different. Not because the stone walls had changed. The people had. Alongside Alphas now sat master healers, village elders, Omega representatives, hunters, craftsmen. Voices once ignored were finally invited inside. Some nobles protested. Kaelan answered with quiet certainty. A kingdom cannot hear its people. If only kings are allowed to speak. No one argued again. One afternoon, Elder Mira approached Lyra inside the royal gardens. Spring flowers pushed carefully through melting snow. The old historian carried the restored Moonkeeper scroll. Months of patient work had repaired much of its damaged text. She handed it to Lyra. "I believe it belongs to you." Lyra opened it slowly. One restored passage caught her attention. "The Moonkeeper is not chosen because wolves obey them." She continued reading. "Wolves follow because the Moonkeeper never asks who deserves compassion." Lyra closed the scroll. "So," she smiled faintly, "it was never about power." Mira returned the smile. "No, it never was." That evening, Kaelan found Lyra sitting outside Ashwood cabin, the same small home where everything had begun. She had insisted on repairing it herself. The broken door had been replaced. Fresh herbs hung beneath the porch roof. Smoke curled gently from the chimney. Fun's favorite resting stone overlooked the valley. Kaelan sat beside her. Neither spoke immediately. The silence felt familiar now. Comfortable, like the night they had shared beside a dying fire. Finally Lyra broke it. "Do you remember what I told you?" Kaelan looked toward the mountains. "You've told me many things." "The first night," she smiled, "I said you had chosen the wrong cabin." Kaelan chuckled softly. "I remember. I was wrong." He looked at her. "No, you chose the right one." She shook her head. "I mean," she laughed quietly, "I think we both did." For a long moment, they simply watched the sunset paint the snowy peaks gold. Then Kaelan reached into his coat, not for a royal decree, not for a jeweled crown, only a small leather cord. Hanging from it was the tiny wooden wolf carved by the little boy from Frostbrook. "I asked him if I could borrow it." Lyra smiled. "He actually agreed? Only after making me promise something." "What?" Kaelan looked directly into her eyes. "That I would never let the healer who fixed the kingdom feel alone again." Lyra's smile slowly disappeared. Emotion filled the quiet space between them. Kaelan continued, "I cannot promise life will always be peaceful. I cannot promise there will never be another storm." He gently offered her the carved wolf. "But I can promise," his voice remained steady, "to face every storm beside you." There was no dramatic declaration, no audience, no ceremony. Only honesty. Lyra accepted the wooden wolf. Then, without speaking, she intertwined her fingers with his. A mutual choice. Nothing more was needed. The first snow of the following winter arrived almost exactly 1 year after the storm that had changed everything. Silver Hollow looked different. border villages traded freely. The winter hunt festival welcomed every pack instead of dividing them. During the pup naming ceremony, orphan wolf cubs and abandoned children celebrated together in the same courtyard. No one questioned it anymore. It simply felt right. High above the valley stood a simple stone overlooking endless forests. Fun's memorial. Wildflowers bloomed around it despite the cold. Every journey through the mountains began there. Travelers would pause, leave fresh water, place flowers, or simply whisper thanks to the old guardian who had believed in a lonely healer before anyone else had. As twilight settled, Lyra and Kaelan climbed the hill together. They stood side by side, looking over the kingdom. Lights glowed warmly from villages scattered across the valleys. Laughter drifted upward on the evening breeze. Children chased wolf pups through fresh snow. No walls separated packs anymore. No banners divided neighbors. Only home. A familiar howl echoed from the distant forest. Then another. Soon thousands of wolves answered together. Not a call to battle. Not a warning. A song. Lyra smiled toward the mountains. They sound happy. Kaelan listened for a long moment. I think, he said quietly, they're reminding us. Of what? He looked at the little cabin below, almost hidden beneath snow. That kingdoms aren't saved by the strongest. His gaze found hers. They're saved by the first person willing to open a door on the coldest night. Lyra leaned gently against his shoulder. Above them, the moon climbed silently over Silver Hollow. Below them, a kingdom once ruled by fear now rested in peace. And somewhere deep within the ancient forest, the spirit of an old gray wolf seemed to run beneath the pines once more, watching, guarding, and knowing that the kindness shown during one desperate winter storm had become the heartbeat of an entire kingdom.